Sure, yeah, I'm Alex Schwartz, CEO and janitor of Owlchemy Labs. Yeah, we're a VR exclusive company now, working on Job Simulator for all platforms. We had 4 original games that we put out on Steam, mobile, and iOS and Android, and then was our first VR foray. That was right after the Kickstarter. It got our DK1 and we put it on Steam. That was the first game on Steam that was not made by Valve that had VR support. So we'll be a Oculus Touch launch title. So they've been talking about their launch timelines. We let them speak for their timelines, but when they come out, we'll be there day one. When the Vive comes out, we'll be a launch title there. PlayStation VR, we don't know when the actual launch title is there. They haven't announced anything, but day 0, day 1, whatever you want to call it, Job Simulator will be there. And that was part of that vision of we want to make sure that when people get a new piece of VR hardware, Owlchemy Labs is there. We're building multi-platform, and that's important to our strategy in VR. So there's slightly modified versions of the design that we've gone with on front-facing camera systems, just due to the affordances of the tracking space. So we have the same game with the same content that we are adjusting at runtime based on what kind of tracking system you have. So it's really not a per-platform change, it's more about how you've set up your trackers. So for forward-facing content, we've made sure that if you turn around backwards that your hands wouldn't drop out from tracking, and really it's to avoid a situation where you lose that hand presence or any presence in the game, and when you're standing and moving around one-to-one, you get a really good sense of that. So we're just trying to avoid breaking that at all times. So the environments actually get modified. So we like to talk about it in the way that IKEA does space-saving designs. So when we need to, let's say you have a really big room that you're going to play Job Simulator with the Vive. We want to make sure that we try to use as much of that room as possible. You wouldn't want to keep them within a very, very, very small square within that. So try to have a large size design that fits. And so we detect, oh, you're in a large room, let's go with that layout. And so that involves setting up the physical items and the interactable items in a way that works for our game. And so that's in the kitchen, we have the counter extended and we put the bell with the plate where you're delivering food, and the fridge a certain amount of units away from each other so that you're physically walking over from one, grabbing stuff, and then traversing, and it gets people up and moving. And then when you have a more limited space, Devin talks about the way that if you have a laundry room and you have a lot of space, you would have side-by-side washer dryers. But the problem is you can't programmatically take that down to half. What they do in the real world is you make a vertical top and bottom set of layouts. And so we by hand rearrange based on the room size to fit with the space that's afforded there. So when we're doing a 6-foot wide tracking area, we'll make sure that everything is accessible within that reach of a wingspan plus a foot to the left and right. So you still have to kind of walk over to one side and walk over to the other, but it's a more constrained space. But we want to have the same experience across all the platforms, just to fit within the usable area. So we're counting on the platform. If it's a platform that has a variable size space where you could be in a small area or a big area, then hopefully that they're feeding us through the API. Okay, they have a 7.5 by this or that. So we have these kind of goalposts of a small, a medium, and a big, and we say, okay, what's the minimum size that they're hitting with that, and go, okay, let's default to medium for this person. If it's a platform like PlayStation VR, we know the camera exactly. We know exactly the FOV. We know we're going to tell them exactly how far to stand back from the camera, and therefore doing math, we know, okay, PlayStation VR is always going to be X feet wide, and let's fit within that constraint. So it's kind of platform detection, but then if it's, for example, on Oculus, do they have 2 cameras? Do they have 1 camera? We should be able to get that data from the software, and we've been talking with Oculus, Valve, and Sony about how do we get this data, how do we make sure that when we boot the game, we give them the best experience, and saying we need this data, we need to know they're 7.5 feet wide based on how they did their chaperone bounds or whatever, because that's part of the experience. And we don't want them to have to pick medium, large. It should be a seamless, I put on the headset, I go in and I play the game. And there's no need to do any weird customization. Hopefully that all happens outside of the content, and that you can just go right in Job Simulator and go. Yeah, I mean the out-of-box experience, I think for the Vive, it involves getting the room set up once so that you could save that data and then say, okay, this is the room, I know where it is, good to go. And the same really applies to all the platforms. You're going to set up your cameras in a certain way in your room, and then you're going to be able to say, all right, this is how my room is laid out, let's save this. And I think it's unavoidable. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to just put cameras or trackers in any space, and it'll like magically figure out the context of the camera, what it's seeing, and how big the room is. But it's not a reality yet. So hopefully they'll just make it as simple as possible. Follow a couple steps, calibrate your room, and that's just like the turn-on procedure. Like you buy a TV and then you got to color balance it or do whatever small amount of steps so that for the next 1,000 hours of using it, it's good to go. Job Simulator, just from a high level, was a really good game for us to do first as a VR company. Well, I mean, there was but as far as a big 1-year production, there's so many things you get to try out in a game like Job Simulator. We have handles and levers and hand interaction and different environments, and it's like a learning test bed, and that's great for a sandbox game and all that. So we started out, the kitchen was one of our earliest experiments, but we ended up going down a path where we thought like a space station repairman would be a really good idea, and you could go and have low gravity and all these like outlandish types of things. And we realized that there was less fun and less humor actually in doing something that wasn't as relatable to your day-to-day. And so with the convenience store and the chef, and you could think about, okay, I cook dinner at night, I'm chopping. Like, I understand the mechanics of these simple things, and then we turn them on their end, and they're hilarious in how strange the robots have, interpreted that. But when it's so outlandish that you've never been a chemist in a chemistry lab, you don't know what's supposed to happen when I mix this volatile fluid with this other thing. Having it do something unexpected is almost, there's nothing to compare it to, there's no baseline. So we like taking the relatable, common experiences and then turning that into just madness, I guess. So, I mean, the game is definitely really conducive to adding more jobs. 5 was the limitation and constraints of the time and getting them done. And we actually originally thought that we would do much more, like a larger number of jobs, and then realized that the fun is in the depth of each job, not the breadth of saying, we've got 20 jobs at launch. I don't think it's an important back-of-the-box number to have. I don't think anyone really cares. And I think having more time to polish the depth and to go, like we were talking about, how absurdly deep the game goes, where we've got these systems that you would say no person in their right mind would ever spend 2 man-months building a fluid system for coffee, just so that in the end someone can drink a coffee and eat a donut. Like, to get those systems right, we've put in a crazy amount of time, and I think going really deep and have little explorable things and finding things in the trash can and having a bunch of hidden elements, that's where the people are going to remember it, versus going to 20 different places. We've been taking bets on, so we get lots of people, they come out of Job Simulator and they're like, yeah, hey, you know what job you should do? It's this. And so, yeah, we don't know what's coming next. We're focusing on finishing the 5 that we've got. Yeah, people do suggest game developer a lot for that meta, how many levels deep inception can you go into virtual reality until you don't realize how many levels you are. So something involving that probably. Right, I mean, we don't have anyone telling us what we need to price, so I think we're going to price the game at what we think is competitive, and yeah, we have no pricing to announce, but I don't think there would be any reason that one platform would have a different pricing scheme than the others, because it's all the same game with the same content.